Welcome to Trandescendant. I'm Joe, and I'm the dad.
And I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And we'll be back right after this little intro.
Well, welcome here. I hope that this podcast was maybe given to you by a friend or a loved one that said, hey, I think you might really like this. And first of all, we want to let you know you're welcome here. Thank you so much for coming and being a part of this. The first thing we want you to know is that we're not expecting you to agree with us or to change or anything. What we want to do is have a respectful conversation and just talk about some of the issues because we think that relationships are what matters.
You may be listening to this podcast because you know someone who is LGBTQ and you're having a hard time with it. You are really connecting, and maybe you think, I'll never connect with that. And that's okay.
It's really hard, I think, for somebody that is skeptical or disagreeing with LGBTQ issues to even begin to engage because so much of it can make you feel like you're just such a bad person and we hate everything about you and how dare you not accept us or be around us. What about the person that says, I don't want to be an ally because I disagree. I'm not at a place where I want to become an ally because I don't support what you're doing. It's not just that I'm not ready. I will probably never be ready because I don't agree with you.
I've been there.
I've been there as well myself. Now, I should let you know I myself am transgender, and that's why we started this podcast was when I came out to Dad and we said, okay, we need to start having some difficult conversations.
I learned a lot from the time you came out, which was how long ago now? Was it 7 years? Approaching 8 years?
I think, yeah.
So, if that's the case, I will tell you that for the first 70 years of my life, I thought differently. I could not see myself being on the accepting side. As a matter of fact, any joke you know about the LGBTQ community, you probably heard from me or someone I told who eventually passed it on to you. I had a whole long list of them. And a variety of other things too. And I had a lot of reasons why I thought I would never want to. I certainly wouldn't want anybody like that living next door to me. To say nothing about the fact that I wouldn't frequent a place that was probably owned by people who were LGBTQ or who run by them or where they frequent. No, let's go someplace else. That would be the kind of lifestyle that I lived for the first 70 years of my life or so.
I wrote an academic paper for a graduate level class on why the Bible says it's wrong to be gay. So I've been there from a very logical, thought through perspective. I know what it's like. And in fact, a few years ago, I started a YouTube channel where I was looking to address people that were not accepting of transgender people. And I ended up being so open on that podcast that my channel ended up being flagged as a transphobic channel.
That's really funny.
That was actually really hard for me. And I thought maybe this is not an easy conversation for me to be engaged in. But the idea here is that as you and I started this podcast, Dad, we wanted to try to strengthen relationships. And we all know somebody. Maybe you've got a son or a daughter that has come out recently, or a brother or sister, or somebody that's close to you, a family member or a friend. And they've come out and said, hey, would you listen to this podcast? And you're maybe thinking, I don't know how I feel about this. Well, we can both say, I don't know how we would have felt at that time in our lives either. And we're not going to try to change your mind in this podcast.
First of all, I will tell you that from my perspective, I didn't change my mind immediately when you came out either. Not right away. I still had my repertoire of jokes, and I had a variety of other things, and I had my own personal ideas and thoughts and commitments, and that's how I felt. And I wasn't going to change my mind in any of those things. It was more of a slow process, I would say. Not vocally because I backed off on that quickly. But in my mind, the change came slowly. And as we started this podcast, I've learned a lot just by doing the podcast. And there's a variety of things that I was really surprised to find out. And one of those is that I now believe that this is not a choice. And before that, I always was confident it was a choice. And you may be confident that you think it's a choice too. And I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to tell you this is something that I learned and it changed my mind. Now, if you don't explore that, or even if you do and you see something you don't agree with, it's okay. It's okay to disagree without being disagreeable.
In the thing that I would always push back on too is, even if it's not a choice, doesn't automatically mean that then everything is okay. In the same way that, let's say that somebody struggles with alcoholism. Now, if you struggle with alcoholism, that might still not be a choice. But that doesn't mean that there aren't healthy ways that you can deal with it. Now, of course, for me, I, as a transgender person who has chosen to transition and live in society as the gender that I feel inside, obviously you can tell that I have changed my viewpoint and Dad has changed his viewpoint as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that you need to change your viewpoint. You might still say, I don't think it's a healthy lifestyle. And that's okay. You don't, the fact that it's not a choice doesn't mean that it's necessarily a healthy lifestyle. But it does help to form a place where you can say, okay, at least I can sympathize with what you're going through.
I think a good way to start, if you want to have some kind of connection relationship with a person in your life who is LGBTQ, I think one of the ways that could really help you and really help me was to begin to understand their struggle. It's something that I didn't think was real. I didn't think, I thought it was something that, well, I can come up with these ideas and these answers and these thoughts and I'm going to use that as my argument of why I want to move over in this direction. Well, it is a struggle. I don't think there is anyone who doesn't struggle if they haven't come out and they know that that's where they should be. That's the real them. It's tough. So understanding the struggle is real is a big step in the fact. I'm not suggesting that you accept it. I'm suggesting that you just learn to understand that the struggle is real, and also that society has a long way to go yet in order for them to work toward equality. That makes a difference. And when you know that, that's a real step to open communication with each other.
I'm not quite following what you're talking about here. So let's say that I'm coming and I'm saying I have reservations about people that have come out. And I understand that you feel like you've needed to come out, but I don't think that that was the right choice. And I'm really hoping that you're going to change and you'll realize that this lifestyle is not healthy for you, and you'll come around and either detransition or come out of your gay or lesbian lifestyle, that you'll come back to be the person that I thought you were to begin with.
I think I went through that. When I can remember when you first decided to transition. We thought, well, we don't really go along with that. So we began to try to bargain with you. Well, maybe you could just do this at home and, or maybe, how about just on on Saturday, and maybe in another city, and we don't want to tell anybody, because who were we protecting? We were protecting ourselves. We weren't protecting you. We were concerned. Well, if you do this, boy, things are gonna be really tough for you. Well, what we really meant is, if you do this, things are gonna be really tough for us. We found out that wasn't true, by the way. Not for us. It wasn't true at all.
But there are things that kids will do that are legitimately bad things. And that's a good reminder that you're not responsible for your son or daughter. You are not responsible for your child's actions once they're an adult and they're out of the door. The decisions that they make are their decisions, and you can't change them. And that happens even the things that we all agree are not good. They make a bad decision for their life. They're with the wrong partner, or they choose a job that's going to be not a good career position, or they make just a silly decision. I think every parent in the world can say, I know that. And you've had times where you've wanted to say to me, that's not a good decision that you're making right now.
Right. I never wanted you to be a frogman. That's from a previous podcast.
And I've had times with my kids where I've thought, that I wish I could help you change, because I don't like the way that you're approaching the situation right now. But recognizing that I can't change them and their decision doesn't reflect on me is the first step towards me having a healthy relationship with them, because then I don't have to control them.
We see sometimes in another area, take LGBTQ out of it. You're going to be a doctor because I was a doctor. Or you're going to be a fireman because I was a fireman. Or you're going to be a pastor because I was a pastor. Well, you may not like this now, but I'm going to have you do this anyway, and you're going to go to school for that, and you're going to decide that's what you're going to be. And you find they're really unhappy. If you've seen Dead Poets Society, you know what I'm talking about. But if you haven't, the parents had all these ideas for their son. He had to do everything he could to try to make his father proud of him. And before school was out, he ended up committing suicide because he just couldn't place his dad. It's a tough show to watch. And I recommend you watch it because it's really worth it.
And of course, the saddest part of that whole movie is, even after all of that was done, the parents still never understood.
Right.
The movie helps you as the viewer understand, but the parents never understood.
Now, we're not suggesting that you could say, well, okay, maybe you don't want to be a fireman because I'm a fireman, but would you consider working in the fire department maybe and as an accountant or something? Who knows? But you understand where I'm going. And the idea is that it's the same situation with the LGBT community. Here they are, and they are something that you don't want and you don't want to accept. But you don't want to go to the ultimate end of that Dead Poet Society story. That just isn't, that nobody wants that. Nobody wants to have this person walk away and suddenly your relationship is done. Tough. Trans people are really people in all walks of society. And you think, well, maybe they're not. No, there aren't any. And they're in all colors. They're in all ages. They're in all genders. They're in all professions. They're in all political orientations. Whatever. They're in all types of religions. It's never ending. It's not, this is a block of people that thinks like this. No, it isn't. It crosses all lines. And to assume that it doesn't is false. There are some people, and I'm sure you've heard this, that think, well, that doesn't occur in our country because when we find out that somebody says that they're gay, we kill them. So it never occurs in our country. Oh, yes, it does. Oh, yes, it does. It occurs everywhere. And they can't say, well, it just doesn't happen in our country because nobody would do that. You know, we start first by cutting off their hand. I don't know how it works, but those are the kinds of, that's an assumption that is really a big mistake. So you think, well, wait a minute. My daughter is a conservative. She's not going to think like this. Or my daughter is a liberal and she wouldn't think this way. And I'm so surprised at that. Or, you know, my father is very committed to his church, and he would never do this. Well, I think I'm speaking to somebody who thinks who has a child like that. Isn't that right? You were really committed to your church.
I was extremely committed to the church.
Yes.
And really given my entire life to ministry and to my service to God. And the entire time I was struggling with who I was on the inside.
But what made it difficult for you is that it wasn't God telling you couldn't do that. It was man. And when you start to follow a person instead of following God, it gets a little mixed up. Just, you know, like Jim Jones. You don't want to drink the Kool-Aid.
But by the same token, again, I want to be the advocate for the person. Again, if you're listening and you're thinking, but I don't agree with all of this. I didn't either. And I was not thinking that I was just following man, so to speak. I was doing my best with what I knew and saying, this is what I believe is true.
Don't make assumptions. The most important thing you can do is just ask questions and listen. Just listen to what they say and come into the conversation with a clean slate, not with an agenda. Just listen. They're not asking you generally to accept. They're just saying, hey, just hear what I'm telling you without objecting or without saying anything. Just take the time to stop and listen.
When we're thinking about relationships, we're looking to preserve the relationship. We're not looking towards what can I do to make the other person in the relationship change. And that means for the LGBTQ person, you're really hoping that you can change the attitudes and the viewpoints of the loved one that you have that is not accepting. And I'm asking you to stop trying to change them. And for you, that they're asking you to change. Your loved one has given you this podcast. I'm asking you also to stop trying to change them. Let's start building the relationship and stop trying to change one another. We stop making assumptions about one another and we say, you know what? Let me come and just listen to what you have to say. You tell me about you and what your feelings are and where you're at in all of this. And I'll tell you about me and where I'm at and where my feelings are. And let's just listen to one another. And let's find ways to connect outside of that.
And part of that connection means you don't have to raise your point or speak louder to get your point across. If the other person is listening and if you're listening, you'll have a calm conversation. And that's really what it takes. When one of you starts to escalate it continues to escalate, and it's difficult to bring it back down. And then one person walks away, or you both walk away and say, boy, they'll never understand anything. Well, of course you won't. And we're not telling you to understand. We're telling you to just listen and hear what the other person has to say and agree to disagree. And that's okay. It makes a difference.
Whoever gave you this podcast, or maybe you're listening for yourself and you've discovered this, imagine somebody giving you an olive branch and saying, I want to get along. And that's where this starts. It says, you know what? I don't want to be at war with you. I'm sick of fighting with you over this issue. I just want to be myself, and I want to let you be yourself. And you don't have to accept who I am, and I don't have to accept who you are in order for us to still have a relationship.
We tend to gravitate to people who are like us. Most of my friends think a lot like I do. And I discovered, well, of course, they were all kind of in the same boat that I was, and they loved my jokes. At least I thought they did. And I discovered when I finally got the courage to begin to tell first some of my closest friends and then some of my other friends as it went out into the group of people that I was with, and I started telling people about the fact that we had a daughter who was transgender. I thought their reaction would be just like mine. I was wrong. I was really surprised to discover, first of all, that a lot of people could identify with me because they had issues like that themselves. If you think you don't know somebody who's LGBTQ, you don't know people. They are way more out there than you think they are. And your friends all have people like that. And many of your friends who you think are just really enjoying all of the things, the comments and the things you're saying, they maybe aren't enjoying it as much as you think. And you may, in fact, not may, you will be surprised at how many people actually are in the accepting camp. It surprised me dramatically. And those that aren't in the accepting camp are at least, well, they're not in the affirming camp maybe, but they're in the accepting camp. And that really helps them to keep a positive relationship with their son or daughter or nephew or neighbor's kid or whatever. And I was so surprised at how large that community is. Much larger than the community that isn't. I was actually in the minority and didn't know it.
You thought that when you told people about me, that you would feel a deep sense of shame.
Yes.
And I thought that when people found out about me, that I would feel a deep sense of shame. And you and I were both surprised to discover that once it's out there, it just becomes a fact of your life, the same as anything else.
It sure does. Yeah. It's sort of like if you hung around with a lot of people and they all smoked and you quit smoking one day. In the beginning, they say, "Really? You quit smoking? Wow, I'm really surprised at that." After a while, nobody knows, nobody cares. You know, in fact, they'd be surprised if they saw you smoking again.
We're not asking you to change. We're asking you to care.
You want to preserve that relationship, which is much more valuable than gold.
And for your LGBTQ loved one, we're not asking them to change. We're asking them to care about you. And that's where relationship building starts.
If you haven't passed this off to somebody and said, "Hey, listen to this," we're going to suggest that you do that right now. And those of you who are listening to this for the first time, you can look at the list of all the different podcasts and all the different things we've addressed. And you might find something in there that you might find interesting. Check it out. You got some comments about this? You got some ideas? You got some thoughts? You got some questions? Contact us. Raya, where can they contact us?
We have an email address, trandescendant@gmail.com. We're grateful for every one of those that comes in and all of the feedback that we've gotten.
And the real takeaway is we're asking you to care. We want you to care so much that you'll be back again here next Monday.
We hope you go out and have a positive week.